What is the purpose of the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America? Well, the words of the Second Amendment are, quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, unquote. So first and foremost, the theme of the need for a militia is the most important part of the answer as to the purpose of the Second Amendment. A militia is where instead of a standing army, you have citizen soldiers that own their own firearms and ammunition, and when there's a need, they can serve as an auxiliary or an extension to the army. And so this is a way basically of keeping the standing army very limited. For over 100 years, for the first 100 years of the existence of this country, there was no real standing army, except, of course, during the Civil War. And, of course, there was a standing army in terms of fighting the Indians. But aside from that sort of need, there was no real standing army. There was a standing navy. The Constitution provided for a navy, but not for an army. And, okay, in Article 1, Section 8, it says the Congress shall have the power to provide for and to, control, discipline the militias. And it gives the purpose of the militias as, a quote, to execute the laws of the Union and to repel invasion. So there you have it. The purpose of the militia is wrapped up in national defense, national security. Now, what's my point? The point is that you have people today that think the Second Amendment is all about, or mainly about, their right to carry firearms, individual right to carry firearms. And of course that's important as a way of fighting crime, self-defense. But crime is not an existential threat. It's not a threat to the very existence of this country. Whereas invasion by other countries, invasion of the United States by other countries, such as Russia, that is a threat to our very existence. So the militia aspect of the Second Amendment, of the function of the Second Amendment, takes priority over the part of the Second Amendment that has to do with, self-defense or fighting crime. I'm saying that you have all these cowboys, these rednecks, that think they're hot shit because they have a rifle or they have a handgun, and they are, strong defenders of the Second Amendment. If they were really strong defenders of the Second Amendment, they would be concerned about national defense. They're not concerned about national defense. Nobody in this country is really concerned. Do you realize that President Bill Clinton has destroyed the triad? We used to have a nuclear arsenal made up of 3 parts. He took one of those parts and put it in mothballs. Our ICBMs, our land-based missiles. The new policy is, well, it was new in his time, and the presidents that came after him have not changed the policy. The new policy under Clinton was to not use our ICBMs. And so this invites Russia to attack us because they know our ICBMs are not going to be used against them. Now, where is the NRA, the National Rifle Association, in this in relation to this idea of national defense? That's part of the the function or the purpose of the Second Amendment. They have no concern about the bigger, the broader, the more important purpose of the Second Amendment. They're totally out to lunch. They have a magazine. They have other things, videos and whatever. They have social media. They, as an organization, they could push for the rebuilding or the return of our triad, and they haven't lifted a finger to combat the mistakes, the misguidedness, the stupidity of the Bill Clinton administration and the administrations of presidents after him. Let me explain why Clinton changed the policy. See, before Clinton, if our satellites reported that a Russian attack was taking place, in other words, that they could pick up the infrared radiation from the ignition plumes of rockets rising into the air from Russia, our satellites could, recognize or detect the heat from the ignition of the missiles, and they would report to the Pentagon, and the Pentagon would report to the president and say that a Russian attack was taking place. Well, and then the old policy was to press a button right away, and but under Clinton, well, see, by the time Clinton came in, Gorbachev had tricked the United States into thinking that Russia was no longer that the Kremlin was no longer a Stalinist, no longer a mentality. And so if Russia was no longer the threat, the main threat, what was the main threat? Well, the liberals and the left-wingers that have infiltrated our government, they push this idea that the really big bugaboo, the really big problem or threat is the idea of accidental nuclear war. That's where our satellites malfunction, and they report that a Russian attack is taking place when there is no Russian attack taking place. The computers and the satellites are malfunctioning. And so Clinton said, well, in order to combat this threat, we have to change the policy. And so they would not. Their change was to not launch our ICBMs, our intercontinental ballistic missiles, and to wait until we felt the vibrations in the ground of the Russian bombs going off, and then Clinton would order our submarines to fire their missiles. And now that policy, well, the idea is that the threat of our submarines firing missiles would be enough to deter a Russian attack in the first place. But you see, even if that was legitimate, at the time that we had 39 submarines, what happened was that we reduced the number of submarines we have down to 14, which is really 12, because only 12 are put into the deterrent. The other 2 submarines are put into mothballs. So we don't have 14, we have 12. And so 12 submarines is just not enough. Not enough firepower to put fear into the hearts of the Kremlin masterminds. Long story short, Russia is no longer afraid of our threat to retaliate, and so they're going to hit us. And the reason they're going to hit us is because we've disarmed too much. And we've had plenty of time. We've seen that Russia was not becoming democratic. It was all a big trick by Gorbachev and by the people that are fronting for him right now. He's still in power behind the scenes. He has frontmen like Yeltsin and now Putin that are his puppets. And we can see that Russia had no intention. It was a total fraud, a charade that they were becoming democratic. They had no intention of letting Russia become a real democracy. It was all the peace moves that Gorbachev made, giving up Eastern Europe, letting the Soviet Union split up, giving up the monopoly of power by the Communist Party. All that stuff was designed to trick us into disarming, and we have been steadily disarming for 30 years. And now that we've gotten finally below the threshold of 1,300 warheads, Russia is getting ready to attack. But my point was that the NRA and these so-called, zealots for the Second Amendment, they have fallen down on the job because they have, concentrated on, protecting their firearms and making sure they retain their firearms, but they haven't given a damn about the status of our nuclear warheads or our nuclear arsenal. And so, in other words, the Second Amendment is designed to, the purpose of it is to promote national defense. The militias are supposed to, be concerned about national defense. We are supposed to be concerned about national defense. The purpose of the Second Amendment is national defense. Let me say it plainly. The purpose of the Second Amendment is for the creation of militias, and their purpose is national defense, primarily. And so no one is concerned about national defense, and so we've let the left-wingers infiltrate, and they've, pressed the buttons, and they've gotten laws passed, and they tricked Clinton, and he's so stupid that he fell for this garbage, this baloney about the threat of our satellites malfunctioning, when there is no real threat that our satellites would malfunction. There's no threat that our computers would malfunction. This is totally bogus. And Russia is still the main threat, and you have nobody. Clinton has never apologized for what he did to this country, and you have none of these presidents that came after him. None of them have changed their ways and reversed course. And that's what I wanted to say in this video. And I'm going to put this this speech that I've made, I'm going to write it into the, make a transcript and put it in the description box under the video, so you can make a copy of it, and so you can save it. And if you save it on the computer, it's not going to be saved when EMP comes, when Russian attack occurs. EMP will destroy the grid and the computers in the United States of America. Now, if you're watching this video outside of America, well, then you can keep, you can keep it on the computer. I assume that your computers will still function. I don't know, they say the internet is supposed to withstand a nuclear attack, but you never know. It could be hyperbole. Anyway, get it down on paper and write your congressman in the time that's left. We have only till the end of this month, possibly, because that's when the Feast of Tabernacles occurs. And I'm not going to try to explain that right now, but it's my guess that the Feast of Tabernacles, it's the biggest of the three holocausts, the big three feasts. In the law of Moses, Deuteronomy 16:16 lists the three times in which all the men are supposed to congregate at the religious center, which was in Jerusalem. Eventually, it was first in Shiloh, but anyway, it's supposed to congregate, and the Feast of Tabernacles, 199 animals were sacrificed. It's a really big Holocaust, and so that's one reason why the nuclear Holocaust may come at the Feast of Tabernacles. Also, it's the harvest time, the end of the harvest, and the rapture occurs at the time of the Russian attack, and that would be a harvest of souls, saved souls, which would mainly occur in the United States and in 3 countries in Europe, and maybe in like South Korea. South Korea, there's a really big chance that the North would attack the South when there is no United States to stop them. The United States will be a basket case after Russian attack, and so the North may very well attack the South. And so those countries and our military bases around the world, that's where the rapture would be limited to. There'll be plenty of places where the rapture will not occur. Rapture will not occur in South America because South America is not going to get bombed. Africa will not get bombed. A lot of Asia will not get bombed. China will not get bombed. Russia will not get bombed because Russia will shoot down our retaliatory strike. So the number of deaths in Russia from our attack, our retaliatory attack, will be very limited. And anyway, that's all for this video. One more note. Russia will rule the world for only 5 months. That's in Revelation 9, verse 5 and 10. It speaks about the occupation, which would actually be talking about Western Europe. And it uses the term beast, and that refers to Western Europe. It goes back to Daniel 7, verse 7 and 8. And it's talking about the Roman Empire in verse 7. Then there's the return of the empire in verse 8. And that's explained in our book of Revelation, 17, verse 8 and 11. And the tribulation originally was 3.5 years. That's Daniel chapter 7, verse 25. And then Christ said, Matthew 24, verse 22, he would shorten the trib because otherwise no flesh would be left. Now that's a hyperbole, but he's talking about the Russian-Chinese war, which would ensue because China would be extremely angry. They would be out of their minds with anger because of Russia taking away from China China's 2 top trading partners. They're making money off America and Europe. They're putting that money into modernizing their military. Russia doesn't like that one bit. Russia wanted China to prefer. They would prefer China to maintain okay, I gotta turn this off.